Welcome to the Rebecca Zahau case. Today we're doing an analysis of the scene and, more importantly, the cryptic message that was left behind on Rebecca's door. What does it actually mean? Was it in third person? And who was the one behind writing it? Was it a last message before Rebecca did something to herself? Or was it another individual that left it behind as a marker, a point to make? But why? What would the motive be? Join me today as we go through a backstory behind the likes of Adam Shacknai, Jonah Shacknai, and their previous history. Some details may actually shock you. In addition, one crucial, important focus point is to do with the paintbrush itself. Whenever you have an artist, there is a canvas that's required, but that will not just cut it. You need paint, you need brushes, maybe even a palette to complete the full cycle. And if certain items are missing, in the situation with Rebecca Zahau, if certain touch-based DNA is missing from those said items, how can she be responsible for leaving the message? It would highlight and enforce that maybe another person was responsible. And take this into consideration, because Adam Shacknai, who claimed to perform CPR and even use a knife to free her to try and bring her back to life, all those claims made, but no hard-based, touch-based DNA evidence that was found on those said items in regard to his actions. Could there be a crossover with some items on the scene which Rebecca did not touch, but another person might have? That is what we're taking a look at. I'm going to do a slideshow analysis, of the scene, the familiar faces, and beyond. So don't go anywhere. Be sure to stick around, sit back, relax. I just want to say welcome to those that are watching this live premiere, and anyone that may be watching in the background. It's much appreciated. I know this case is a little bit quieter, but it's still important to cover. It's interesting, it's deep, it's mysterious, and I just appreciate the people that do, continue to watch and support me. With that being said, let me know your thoughts either in the live chat box, or if you want to make use of the live emojis, they're available there. And afterwards, if you have any comments, questions, answers, that's all welcome down below under the video, and I'll respond back when I can. If you are interested in the full playlist of the Rebecca Zahau case, as for my coverage up to now, that is available top right corner where the eye symbol is. And in addition, there might be the odd loose video attached with breaking news of other cases that I've covered a few days ago. With that being said, let's get into today's mystery. Setting the scene, Spreckles Mansion. This is from the front view of the house, and it's round the back and the courtyard, the balcony, where it all unfolded. Looking up to the balcony, Rebecca's bedroom there was, and inside, a range of items scattered about on the ground. The door, though, leading to her bedroom told another story. As you can see there, a cryptic message. And whilst it might be a little difficult to read, it was confirmed to have said, "She saved him. Can you save her?" Based on that language and wording, if by any chance it was Rebecca that wrote that message, why would she do that? Supposedly, there was details from the report that bits of paint, black paint, were found on her body, on her skin, her hands, and that her thumbprint was on a paint tube. So does that instantly mean that she must be behind it? It can come across that way. However, who is more or less likely to get paint in a situation on the body? The person that's doing the painting, depending what type of painting it is, or someone else that's doing the painting gets it on their hands and then starts moving things about, including her, such as touch-based DNA. There's different ways of looking at it. But if this was Rebecca's own doing, it would appear that she is writing in third person because it says she, as in she must mean her, Rebecca. And if Rebecca is talking about herself, it's in third person. Now, could that be because psychologically speaking, she is choosing actively or against her own choice, more of a defense mechanism? Is it a form of disassociation, disconnecting from the character, the person she is, an outer-body experience, almost foreshadowing what's going to happen? The terms, the conditions, can they be met by the hands of another person? Because it says saved him, that implies a previous event has already happened and was successful. So, she, as in Rebecca, had already saved a male. Him, a male. But which male? Who exactly? Her boyfriend, Jonah Shacknai, who she knew for about 2 years or so previous, or would it be the brother Adam Shacknai? What other males have come into play within this case? Off the top of my head, really no one. So it's between Adam, Jonah, maybe Max. And that's what we're looking at today. As we move on later, we're going deeper with those individuals. But for each person that could have been responsible, either for the painting on the door or somehow tied to the message, the text on screen, she must mean Rebecca, because who else can it be? It says, can you save her? So the woman that saved a male is now the woman that's in distress and needs rescuing before it's too late. As it reads, can you save her? That implies that it's a question towards whichever male who supposedly should know who they are because they were saved by her previously. So it's now time to give back. But what are these conditions? Why did this unknown male need saving in the past? And under the conditions now that she needs saving, is it natural or is it planned out? Is it done on purpose? Is it a form of disassociation where you put yourself in the victim role in hopes that you will get a reaction from someone? That sometimes you may go cold or push a person away in hopes of secretly wanting them to push back and chase you. That psychological game of cat and mouse. Was it a natural situation in which a male needed to be saved physically from death, physically from danger, or psychologically that they were going through mental health crisis, a breakdown, depression, dark thoughts in the past, that Rebecca had come into the life of a male and was there as a support system, a support role, a good friend, a girlfriend, who knows what it could be, that her caring persona, being kind, understanding and patient, is what pulled someone through the darkness so they were no longer sinking. Could that be what it means, as in she saved a person? But that comes across as natural, that two souls meet together, broken or one, and the other one's okay, and things heal with time. And now has come a time where, maybe Rebecca needs rescuing, needs saving, needs the favour returning, but is it planned out or is it natural? A natural situation of events unfolding out of her own control, out of her own capacity, mentally in the moment struggling, even freezing, not knowing what to do, and leaving this message. Ideally, if Rebecca was responsible, she would have to have done it before she did what she did to herself, supposedly, of course. Which would mean, considering that she was tied and bound and arms behind back, she wouldn't have been able to do the painting at that point. So it would have to be before that. Does it look like it was in a rush? It's actually quite neatly written in a way. It has been described as block writing, meaning you can't use it as a comparison to somebody's normal handwriting because it's considered universal or generic. It doesn't have that uniqueness about it, a certain signature style that a person may have when doing normal writing. It has been said, and credit to the viewer out there in the background, you know who you are, that said to me in the past that Rebecca was known for being a painter. She had her own paint collection, paintbrushes, into art and all of that. So does that make it more likely that she would be writing that message on the door? You can put that argument across, yes, but just because people have an interest in something and have all the resources available doesn't always mean to say instantly that they are the ones behind it. If it's at the house and the place where her tools, her hobby is at, and somebody else comes along, they could take advantage of it and use it against her and almost make it as if she was the one that did it because she is the artist, she's the painter, she's the one with the paintbrushes. You wouldn't consider anybody else, any other stranger, because they may not have any ties with painting or styles of that. They don't participate in that. And the items that are present are personal possessions of her. So they could have been used against her. But if she needed saving, would she be talking about herself needing saving from what? Saving from the guilt and grief of what's happened to Max? She feels partially responsible. Well, in the autopsy, it stated that she didn't show much signs of feeling to blame for it. She was sad with the situation, but that was all. Though what could have transpired on the day, the morning, which would be the 13th, on that day, in the early hours of the morning, she did receive a voicemail from the boyfriend, Jonah Shacknight, about Max's conditions turning, for the worst, basically on the verge of death, no hope. And we'll get into that as a counterpoint later on as we apply it to how someone else could have been saved at some point. Because if you think about it, yes, you can interpret it as whoever she saved in the past, this message could be directed for them, as in now it's time for you to step up. But it could also mean, whether it's by Rebecca herself or another person, she may have saved a male in the past, whether that be an adult, a teenager, or a child. Rebecca helped someone, and now she's asking maybe another person, can you save her? Now, why would some other person want to save her? Or why would she expect or anticipate or hope for another individual to save her when she has saved someone different in the past? Maybe because there is an emotional tie, a bond connected between who Rebecca saved in the past and who needs to save her now. If by any chance it was to do with Max being saved and now it's can you save her, repaying the favour, repaying the debt, it would be Jonah that would have to step up and save her because the son was saved. Well, not quite, but if you used to put a certain narrative across, you could throw it out there in an argument and then say, now it's time to help her. But this the thing, naturally in life you help someone, you support someone, whatever it is. A person you're close to or know, you support them, maybe unconditionally. You support an individual, a loved one, a person you're close to. You give them the support they need, they deserve, even if they don't feel worthy of it at the time. They deserve to be supported and to be around others, for sure, naturally speaking. But in those situations, you shouldn't expect anything back. You may hope that you get support as well at other times, but in the moment, you're doing it because you care about someone. You're not doing it in small hopes that they will, reward you just because you've been nice to them. You don't expect anything back or in return in the moment. So if Rebecca was to have written this, whilst it's a historical event that's supposedly documented or deemed as a fact that she did save a person, now asking for someone else to step up and save her, is it because she has put herself in that position by her own actions, her own will, to endanger her own life with a ticking time, clocking away, in hopes that someone can come and save her? Like, it's staged. Not faked, but it's not natural. Whoever she helped in the past could have been natural, but the person that has to save her now may be unnatural because she's put herself in a bad situation or a bad place. On the sideline, you could argue and say, but what if how she felt the night before, she was different and felt different the next day? That is quite possible. With the influence of that voicemail, hearing that in the early hours, that could have shaken her up. She may have not felt responsible before, but she might afterwards. Or she may have not worried too much before because she felt that Max was okay, and if CPR was given, then it shouldn't be a problem. But when hearing the news of the condition getting worse and basically life-threatening, end of the line, that's when things shake up quickly. That is why when we head on over to the scene, or part of the scene, which is her bedroom, and in regard to YouTube, this is for educational reasons, and as a disclaimer, heads up if there's any triggering points. As a little disclaimer, later on, we look into the background of Jonah Shacknai to an extent in relation to this painting on the door, the text, and try and figure out what's going on there. Just wanted to give you a bit of a disclaimer, trigger warning for later, just so you're prepared, or if you need to brace yourself, whatever it may be. But basically, what we see on screen, given the next few slides, which could have the odd marker on, and that's just done because of, I guess, guidelines on YouTube. I don't know how sensitive things are, but the most important parts are circled as you see there. So, evidence piece 36, pretty much center of the screen, you have like a paint tube from the looks of it. Not a great deal of paint, but, more than enough, I guess, to be used for on the door. But the interesting thing is, the paint tube does have a hole at the top of the label, like it would hang up on a shelf, probably from a hardware hobby store. But, in terms of, okay, the lid is open, so it's likely being used, and the colour is black, matches the blotches on the carpet, on the paintbrush, and on the door. But it doesn't look like too much is being used or it's being strained, because normally when you've got a tube like that, you've got to squeeze it out. It doesn't look like it's compressed, does it? Or decompressed. It looks quite full, but it must have been used in some way. Just under the bed, you've got like a dog toy, dog bone, which isn't anything too significant, but it's in link to Ocean, the name of the dog, in relation to 2 days before, which would be the 11th day of the month, 2011, when Max had his accident and fell over the banister and hit the ground, and his only words were calling for a dog called Ocean, that's all. There are some dirty marks on the carpet, which some of it could well be dirt and more so the paint trodden in. So, normally if you're painting a wall or decorating, you're probably going to do the best you can, the best job, or you want someone else to step in and do it for you. And if it's not good enough, you will fill it out, because if you want it perfect, you want it perfect, and that's understandable. If you're in a rush or you don't really care that much in the moment, you're more likely to be reckless, clumsy, and make mistakes or leave marks behind. The more you care, the more clean you're going to be. You can still have mistakes, mishaps, and spills and drips, of course, but, when you're in a rush or you're speeding about, you're not quite thinking or processing things through. So whoever was doing the painting, they could well have been in a rush. Were they in a rush to get the message out before whatever happened to Rebecca happened? Or did they just want to get the message done out the way so then they could plan and prep everything else after that point? There is that possibility that if Rebecca had already passed away, and if that message was written afterwards, well then obviously it would be by the hands of someone else, which would make it a form of foul play and possibly murder. I mean, it may have been suggested, but I don't think it's a popular theory that if she did it to herself with someone else there to witness it, but not save her and just watch. If that really was the case, whoever was to write the message after, it just wouldn't make any sense, would it? Because what we've got to consider, if anyone was to do anything to her, and more so over the balcony, it's the chances of survival very low. Considering no one else is around on site to actually save her besides Adam, well, what hope is there really? I'm not saying Adam is involved, but put Adam aside and you just have a male present that may be responsible for her death. If they were then to write the message on the door saying, you know, Rebecca, your Rebecca, or the Rebecca that you know of has saved a said individual previously, now it's time for her who's in danger, can you save her? It's like Saw, you know, the horror film. It's like, how much will you shed? What will you do? What lengths will you go to for the sake of a loved one? How far will you go for the sake of saving someone? What will you do? What's the ultimate price you're willing to pay? It's like a game, a twisted one. But it wouldn't make much sense because under the conditions of going over the balcony and no one else being present, time limited until no longer being able to breathe. What we do have to acknowledge is Rebecca, with the autopsy, it did say inside there was no broken neck. And normally you would associate that injury if you were to go over something and drop from a height. I'm not saying the words because of YouTube, but you know what I'm getting at. So it could imply that maybe her going over the balcony wasn't the actual cause of death, but staging it as self-inflicted, that something else happened before that, which may have still involved, you know, not being able to breathe, suffocating, and all that by the hands of another person. But if it's a time-limited action, you need to be able to write the message out in hopes of someone being able to come along and find it in time to save the person. An example would be, let's say you're in the bedroom, Rebecca was somewhere, maybe on the bed, let's say she was tied or handcuffed, not to be taken out of context, and they had a clock on their chest with wires. You know what I'm saying? And it's counting down. A message is sent out. The clock is ticking away. You've only got so long to get here, diffuse the wires, disconnect the circuit to save her. Are you willing? Is that what you're going to do? And visually speaking, that's how it translates here. She saved him. Now it's time for you to do your job. Are you able to? Can you? Can you get there in time to cut the wire, to get rid of that device, to save her from death? It gives a time frame window to be able to follow through with that. If everything happened inside of the bedroom, as in what Rebecca went through, or near or over the balcony, if everything happened there, the likelihood of having that time frame window of someone being able to come on down to save her would be very slim. So whoever was to write that message would be absolutely pointless unless it was done in a sarcastic way. That it was a psychological tactic. They knew, let's say if it's by the hands of someone else, they knew that, yes, Rebecca may have done good in the past. Now it's time for her to be deserving of it too in return. But done in such a dark way that you give someone false hope and then you let them down or let someone else down because what you've actually done to her, there's no chance of coming back from it. There's no chance of her being saved. There's no chance of survival because it's already too late. Yet you write that line out when it is too late. Yeah, it can happen that. I'm just going through all the different possibilities and theories in regard to Rebecca being responsible and Rebecca being on the receiving end, right? But in regard to this cryptic message, as in who could him be, we still need to figure that out, of course. And even if people believed it to be Rebecca, some of the key evidence doesn't add up in the situation. Just to focus in, down there we got the blotches of black paint. Hopefully it shows on screen. Not too much, but there are some marks and additional paint marks, as you see, and that supposedly comes from this tube. But what paintbrush was used? Well, you got one down there, evidence 33. I do have a zoomed in angled shot, which we'll get to shortly. Looking at this one, I've just got it blurred out as in, the material that was found on Rebecca and over the balcony. That, just because of YouTube, I don't trust YouTube. But the main focus point why we're here on screen is that paintbrush there. That appears to have been used because there is black paint on the tip, on the bristles, and a little bit touching the ground. So it was either dipped in or, the tube of paint was squirted onto the brush and then, dropped on the floor. But this is the thing. It doesn't look like it's being dropped on the floor. Granted, maybe it's cushioned by the carpet, but you'd expect more markings. And I can try and explain that shortly. From this angle, once again, the odd thing just blurred just in case. So you see evidence 26. It's very obvious what item that is. Whether it be that particular one, kitchen knife, or there is a secondary one off camera, not far from it, but it's more thin and it's not a big, blade. One of them did have Rebecca's touch-based DNA on it, or at least her blood. But the blood as in period. So from down there in the private area. And at that time, for her, it was brought on early, possibly. But what would bring it on early? Stress, worry, anxiety, a sudden change, a feeling, hormones fluctuating, a tense moment. What would have caused that though? Rebecca waking up in the morning, what is there to fear or worry about? Well, that voicemail upon hearing the news of Max, his outcome getting worse. Surely that wouldn't have made her feel too good about the situation, correct? Now, as for what's on the ground, which I'm not too sure it is an evidence bag. I don't think it can be, but I don't know why it's there. Some kind of bag sheeting, because it's got paint on. Little marks of paint about. But what's that bag doing there? What's that actually for? Is it which had the supplies in, the paints, the brushes? Is it a shopping bag? I don't know why it's there. But it's left as it is, of course, because it's a scene and it needs to be treated as it is. I think there is a baby wipe next to the blade. Now, if that's the case, why? Used to clean down it off DNA? And then you got that paintbrush from that angle. This is what's most important and why we're talking about it, though, and why it's circled. Some of this is collected from the autopsy, and other parts within this will be collected from other reports within the case over time, right? It says, in the Rebecca Zahau investigation, forensic testing on the paint brushes were inconclusive regarding DNA. At the end of the day, they were unable to find DNA, touch-based DNA, any DNA, pretty much on the paintbrushes in link with Rebecca, meaning there's no hard evidence that Rebecca used paintbrushes to do the writing. And from the looks of it, you would need a paintbrush to write it out on the door there. Because with it being in blocked writing, you can associate that with a paintbrush, the bristles on it, and how you can flatten the brush as you press on the door and drag to spell out the words. And furthermore, the fact that you can see that there is paint on the brush, it shows that they were used. In addition, according to the testimony from the San Diego Sheriff's Department, whilst Zahau's DNA and fingerprints were found on that, as you see read there, the bed frame, and the paint tube cap, little to no DNA evidence was recovered from the paintbrushes themselves. The wording little implies a bit, but also it says to no, really nothing. Key details regarding the painting evidence include the paint tube. Zahau's thumbprint was found on the cap of the black paint tube. Physical evidence on Zahau, black paint matching the message on the door, was found on Zahau's right hand, chest, and neck. Now, it is possible that if you're painting yourself, you could touch yourself, you could, scratch your neck, scratch or touch your chest, and if you've got paint on your fingertips, it's going to spread. But as for her right hand, is Rebecca left-handed or right-handed? That's something to consider possibly. Interesting. As you see here, zoomed in and enhanced, this appears to be the choice of paintbrush that was used on the door. You can clearly see that the bristles of the paintbrush is covered in black paint. And as for the tube, which had on the cap Zahau's thumbprint touch-based DNA, that is in reference to what you see circled there. So if her thumbprint is on it, does that mean that she actually touched it and used it? Well, to be honest, if only her thumbprint was on the cap, the end, as you see it's opened, normally, if you're going to use paint, especially when it's in a tube, you're going to use your full hand, you're going to wrap it around the shaft of the tube, and then you're going to squeeze it until that paint comes out onto a paintbrush. Unless you had a palette or a tray or something to collect the paint, so then you can swill and dab the brush in to collect. Either way, there's going to be touch-based DNA and a lot more of it around the shaft of the tube and not just the end of the flap. That's what makes it really strange. The way it's placed down as well, and it seems a little bit untouched. It doesn't look strained, it doesn't look damaged, it doesn't look like it's been squeezed of all that paint. It doesn't look constricted. That's what I'm saying. Only a little bit was used. Only a little bit of touch-based DNA was applied to it. I said, normally, if you're going to use an item like that, you're going to hold it in your hand, aren't you? And then you're going to open the lid, the flap, involves touching with your thumb to flick it open, and then you're going to squeeze it around the base or the midsection of the shaft to get the paint out. You've got a full hand grip around it. Surely there'll be more touch-based DNA and not just a thumbprint on the lid. There's got to be so much more touch-based DNA on it if you're using it and you're responsible. If you only touch the flap of the lid, then how else does the paint come out? What, she just steps on it? Uses her foot, if she's wearing a shoe, stands on it to squeeze it out. But if that was on the carpet, you'd get like a trail, a mark of it, squirted out. Is it possible that she was wearing gloves? You could argue that, put gloves on. But why not put gloves on the moment, the beginning of anything, really? There's no point touching some things and then think, right, I'm going to put the gloves on now so then it prevents any DNA evidence being left behind. Oh, I've already left some DNA evidence behind because I touched this before I put the gloves on. Yeah, Just doesn't make sense, does it? If something's going to be deep and mysterious and calculated, which this could come across as because it's still truly unsolved to this day, you thought her would have done a better job at making it more covered up if she really meant to, in a way. You know, a cryptic message as well. It's weird. So ultimately, I think this is a little bit strange. I would argue and say, because it mentioned about, little to no DNA evidence was recovered from the paintbrushes, implies that the paintbrush was used, but not exactly by her. If there's no DNA evidence on the paintbrush which was used, then clearly she didn't use it. And if that same paintbrush was used to create that message on the door, as you see there, another person was responsible. And if another person was responsible, who was it? When did they decide to do it? I'm just thinking, could you have a hybrid where Rebecca may have done it to herself, but then Adam came along, realised what happened, and as he was panicking to try and get items to, cut her loose, whether he knew what was happening or not, he then decided to paint on the door this. It wouldn't make any sense, that, would it? But does this case actually make sense, really? So you've got to look at it from different angles and perspectives. But if a paintbrush is to be used, but there's no DNA upon it in relation to the said person like Rebecca, then clearly she couldn't have been responsible for it. And take in mind, it did say paintbrushes. It's not just one, it's more than one, a couple at least. I still think this is a bit of a red flag. If she was responsible for the message on the door, her DNA should be on the paintbrush. If her DNA can be on other items like the bedpost, rope material, possible blade handle, if she can touch all these other items successfully, then why is she not able to touch and leave a print behind on this item and the paintbrush is one of the more crucial parts behind the mystique and crypticness of it all? It implies that she didn't touch it and she didn't act on it. So if she didn't do the message, did she do what she did to herself to end up over the balcony then? Maybe not. The thing is, people could say, yes, but there is at least some thumbprint on the lid of the paint tube. Yes, but it's a half-hearted attempt, isn't it? As in leaving a bit of print behind. If you're going to use it, there's going to be more print on the shaft tube area and not just the lid. So it makes me think, if another person was responsible, they may have tried picking up Rebecca's right hand, and whoever it was that may have had paint on their hand, it made contact with Rebecca's hand, and that's why the paint was smudged onto her to make it seem like that she was the one to do the painting. And in doing so, picking up her right hand, a person could have then grabbed her thumb and then rubbed it onto this paint tube to contaminate the scene. Like when you stage something, when you plant evidence onto someone, or you plant someone onto a piece of evidence to make a connection, but it's done out of manipulation and changing the narrative in an unjustly way. That's what someone could have done, possibly. Is there anything else what we need to acknowledge? Little to no DNA evidence was recovered from the paintbrushes. Paint tube, thumbprint, and only a thumbprint. Just one finger. Not others, not the palm, not the knuckles. No indication of grabbing the paint or actually using it. Just a simple brush or touch on the edge. If Zahau truly, consciously, when alive, left a thumbprint on the cap of the tube, that one touch wouldn't be enough to get all the paint magically out onto a brush and then magically paint it on a door. It just wouldn't. So it's strange. And I think that the black paint that may does match from the message on the door to Zahau's body, doesn't mean that the paint was applied onto her by herself. It could be by the actual painter, the artist. And this is the brush to be used. So when it comes to Adam Shacknai, brother to Jonah, boyfriend to Rebecca, and Rebecca, I guess, friends in some way to Adam, considering Adam said he used a knife, as for which one, I'm not too sure, but as an example photo, evidence 26 marker, or the other one off screen, which was a smaller one, as an example that Adam used to cut her down to free her and then performed CPR. Touch-based DNA on those items on her, but there wasn't any. He told the story of what he did to police, but police and etc. found no hard evidence, no DNA of that matching to the description that Adam gave. So, if Adam was supposedly able to do this and that without a trace or a print, then don't you think it's possible that the paintbrush that was used, this one, which clearly has paint on, which clearly makes contact with the ground as well, so it's either been dropped or placed down likely, that because there was no DNA of Rebecca on this, was there any DNA belonging to anybody else, though? Supposedly not, but it has been used, and likely it was used on the door, because you need a paintbrush to do that block writing, and this has paint on it. It's quite obvious, but no DNA belonging to Rebecca implies she didn't leave the message. And, just in general, regardless of the cause of death and all the questions around that, the fact that there's no DNA on the brush could imply she didn't use it, but clearly someone else had to use it in order to write the message. And whoever that was, did they think to call the police, the ambulance services? And at what time did this all unfold exactly? At the time of her death? Post-death? Before her death? Was it planned? Was it on the spot? The person that decided to leave the message behind, did they do anything to her? Did they try helping her in any way, whether they're responsible or not? It's just very strange. Very likely, if anyone was to use the paintbrush beside Rebecca and paint the message on the doorway, very likely to be linked in some way and responsible for her outcome and death, because a normal person wouldn't walk in and see her the way she was and do nothing. A normal person wouldn't just walk in and see the after effects and think, right, now let's do a little painting on the doorway. No, not likely. So you let me know if you have any more questions on this paintbrush. The only thing that I will say about it, whilst it has been used, and there are some, splodges just next to the bristles on the carpet, there's not much of it. If that paintbrush was somewhat saturated with black paint at the time, there's still a thick coating on that brush after use. But before it made contact with the ground, due to the amount of paint that appears to be on the brush end, you would expect more of a splashback, more splash marks on the carpet or ground. When you drop a brush by accident, how often is the brush going to land perfectly flat? Maybe it hits the edge, maybe it hits the end or the brush part first, and as it hits the ground, it wobbles, it rattles, it rolls. You get what I'm saying? And with a bit of additional paint on the brush, once it hits the ground, it might jolt it, causing a bit of paint to splash up or splash around the surface area upon impact on the ground. Granted, it is a carpet, so it's going to absorb some of that gravity, momentum, absorbing it, slowing it down, preventing it from bouncing or jolting as hard as like a wooden floor, and preventing it from rolling the same as a flat, smooth, polished wooden floor. Yes, but still, I would have expected a little bit more paint, as in the surface area, a few more splash marks on one side, on the other, and so on. But there appears to be a lack of that. If you were to gently place a brush down flat, the bristles will still make contact with, the floor, and it will leave a mark behind. But what I'm saying, it just feels like the paintbrush was used, but it was also placed down. It wasn't dropped, it wasn't thrown down, it was gently placed on the floor. From my interpretation, at least. There's a lack of marking on the floor around the surface area, the radius. But why would anyone gently place it down? If someone was to gently place it down, it comes across as if they're being careful with what they do, methodical in a way, not wanting to cause too much mess. If that's the case, could that also be why they're cautious and wary behind avoiding touch-based DNA on the brush itself? It was used, but there's no DNA on it. So there's a higher chance that maybe someone was wearing a glove in order to use it. Now, if Rebecca had gloves about, which I think there might have been a reference to, could she have just put them on herself? She could, but the fact that there are other items in that room, more items against the idea of no DNA, more items that show that she touched things somehow, you'd think that she would wear gloves for anything that she does or touch, including the paintbrush and the bedpost and cloth and all of that. But it's not consistent. And with it not being consistent, it doesn't seem as likely. But beside that paintbrush, what about the other one closer to the bed? Just near to the bag. Evidence 33, that marker. Why do we have two paintbrushes? Were both used? This one has a thinner shaft and a thinner brush bristle end. I don't think that this type of brush would have been suitable enough to leave it on the door. Because whilst, yes, it is blocked, paint and writing, it's quite chunky. Now, how many times did she or who or they, how many times did they have to go over it to spell it out letter by letter? The first part where it says she, the S appears to be lacking with paint because there's bold patches where the S is. Maybe there wasn't enough paint on the brush. Or, you know what I would say? Maybe both brushes were used, but one was used first for one letter, and then the other paintbrush was used for the rest of the letters. And that is why, although it's all in blocked writing, only one letter appears thinner compared to all the other letters. Look at how chunky that A is. Look at how chunky the V and the E is. Look at how chunky the A, N and D is there. Look at how chunky that H is. I'm just thinking, and it's simply an opinion, that the reason why that letter appears so thin in font, in visual format, maybe because that S was used by this brush. Now, it's hard to tell the colouring of it, but the bristle, the end, does appear to be of a different colour. Now, it looks a little dark, but it could also be the same colour as the handle. It is also possible that the paintbrush could have been used in the past and she never got round to cleaning it. But if by any chance that there is a bit of black paint on the tip of that brush, because of how thin it is, that could have been used to start the message off with saying, where it says she, as in the S, the letter S may have been used with that thin brush. And then whoever realised, this is going to take me forever to be using this small brush, I'll put it down. And then, instead of using this brush, I'll use this one. Because look at how much bigger the bristle is. This seems like more of an efficient tool to use when writing it out, painting it out in a quicker, time-efficient way. It would imply time isn't on their hand, whoever they are, in the position of power or death. They're in a rush, but not too much of a rush in some ways. It's interesting. You let me know, do you think both paintbrushes were used? Do you think that evidence 33 paintbrush was used at the beginning of the sentence, then they realised it was going to take too long to spell it all out with a thinner brush, so to get it done quicker, just like if you're painting a big open flat wall, instead of using a tiny paintbrush, you either get a big paintbrush or you get a roller. you save the time, you get the job done quicker, and this paintbrush would have been more practical to use. Now, if more than one brush was used as an attempt to leave a message, considering Rebecca is the artist and is into painting, you would think that she knows what brushes work best for what canvas, what material, and whatever she may decide to paint or create. So, like when you've got a surgeon, a doctor, they're performing an operation, they are going to use the appropriate tools for that moment, for that body part, because they know what they're doing and have experience with those items. You bring in a random person from off the street, put them in a surgical room, operation theatre, and you ask them, right, grab anything you can find or what you think will work best for this. How likely are they to pick up the right item for that job? Not likely. It's a bit of a higher end example, but you get what I'm saying. For Rebecca to have the experience with painting, brushes and brush strokes, and probably using a variety of different brushes from different lengths to different materials, different qualities of bristle, using different paints with the different brushes, the different techniques, and even holding the paintbrush at different angles, you would think that she would know best. Now, if a person isn't psychologically right or doing well in the moment and not coping well, they might not be able to think clearly. So everything that they know or are an expert of may go out the window and mistakes can be made. There is still that, of course. But when you pair it with the lack of DNA on the brush to link to her, more than likely someone else responsible, or it can come across that way. And if someone else is more responsible for it, someone else is probably more likely to not have the experience. If they're not an artist, if they're not a painter, they're going to do a quick, messy job and realise, right, let's just use whatever paintbrush is about. Maybe they're rummaging through, trying to find her paintbrushes, trying to find something that they can use to leave a message on the door. Maybe no permanent markers. Maybe a pencil won't do it. But on wood, paint works. Oh, here's paint. Rebecca has some. She's got paint brushes, so let's use that. We'll use the thin one first. Oh, it's taking too long on the door. It's not practical. What other paintbrushes do we have? Searching around, maybe looking through drawers, cabinets, wherever she normally stores them, finally finds it and then decides to use it. But then what? Going back and forth with the door, getting the paint, wearing gloves possibly to avoid any evidence, touch-based DNA. But then at the end, finishing off and thinking, right, we need to make it look like Rebecca did this because she is the painter. She is the one that is behind all this, supposedly. So let's grab her hand. Oh, I've got paint on me. I've left some paint on her. Never mind. It makes it look more realistic. And then, use a hand, rub it, press it against the paint cap tube to make it look like she touched it. But for some reason, they forgot to use or grab her hand and wrap it around the brush. Yeah, a little bit strange, isn't it? It's like gloves were used for one thing, but maybe not for the other, or gloves were used but not considered for Rebecca in what she should touch and shouldn't. My thoughts, my opinions, they may not link to yours, and that's okay. You can always let me know if you agree or disagree down below. But interesting, isn't it? It's on the door, the outside, I think, of the bedroom door. Or is that the inside? I think it's the outside. It looks like the outside of the door. Out of everywhere you could have left a message, could have left it on the wall, but you left it directly on the door because it's the personal entranceway to her sanctuary, to her safe place, or so you'd hope to think. And in that safe place, it's being consumed by darkness. Something has taken over. And now it's time to save her. But realistically, can she be saved when it was too late? And speaking of Max, how we said earlier, if by any chance, whether it be by Rebecca or someone else, if they were saying that she, which is likely Rebecca in third person or meant from a different point of view, that Rebecca saved Max, that can't be the case. Because on the right there, you see a small little example of the staircase, not the top floor there, so it's not the correct angle. I think it's the next slide here, yes, where he was on the landing, the hallway corridor up there, coming on down this hallway at an angle on his Razor scooter, not stopping in time, hitting the banister circled in the oval, where the banister drops down in gradient, more likely to fall over it. And as you fall over it, you come crashing down that way, hitting the ground floor. And just before you hit the ground floor, which isn't here because it's post-event, there was a chandelier dangling down. So when you go over the banister, you're either going to land on top of the chandelier or you're going to grab it instinctively and it pulls, breaks off the chain, hits the floor and lands on or near to Max's, body. And at the time of hitting the floor then, was he still alive? Supposedly, yes. Whether it be Rebecca or Rebecca's sister performing CPR, whilst the other vice versa made a call to emergency services. Was that enough to save Max in the moment? Because Rebecca may have felt that she saved Max by performing the CPR, or whoever. But, at the end of the day, once in hospital due to the conditions and the way it was looking, fast forward on 2 days later on the day of Rebecca's death, but hours in the early morning when she was still alive, it did say that she did listen to the voicemail. She didn't reply back, but she listened to it. And Jonah was basically telling her that it's not looking good and likely he's not going to make it. So it puts a dampener, a massive negative, a dark cloud over the situation and with Rebecca. Whether she felt responsible or not, if she was the one to perform CPR on Max, she may have felt like she did a good job, that was enough. Then finding out days after it wasn't enough, that crushing feeling inside. You wanted to be there to save the person, but you couldn't be, then you blame yourself afterwards, but it's not your fault. You're doing your thing. Max, the age he was, didn't need full-on supervising within reason because it was in the house. Should have been a safe place, technically speaking. Rebecca can't have eyes in the back of her head. Neither can really anyone out there in life. There's only so much that you can do. There's only so much that you can do as a friend, as a parent, a mother, a father. You do the best you can. And even when you do the best you can and things go wrong, you may still blame yourself or just indirectly feel bad about the situation because it's a sign that you actually care and it's an important moment for whatever reason. So it's all natural, normal human behaviour, of course. But, when you've got a form of hope that maybe what you've done, you've revived them, you've saved them before it got worse, as in Max, well, it just wouldn't make sense under the circumstances of this message because whilst Max technically wasn't literally or factually dead on the day of Rebecca's death, it was 2 days afterwards or so when he did pass away, considering what Jonah said on the phone, it's not looking good whatsoever, he's likely not going to make it, that pretty much sets the tone already that it's a downwards trend from there and it's only a matter of time till they pass. So if Rebecca or really anyone decided to paint this on the door to say that she, as in Rebecca, saved Max, for example, that's not true. Rebecca didn't save Max. Rebecca made an attempt and tried to save Max, but it wasn't enough. That doesn't mean to say that they should blame themselves or that she's responsible. It's just that, once again, in life, there can be things that are out of your control, physically, psychologically. There's only so much that you can do. And when you do make that conscious effort to step up, to support, to defend, to revive, to fix, to heal, whatever the situation with someone, you can only do so much. And in the moment, you might feel it's enough. And then afterwards, if you're met with a reality check or negative news, it can have a stronger blowback upon the person because they thought they tried or they may feel like they didn't try enough. Rebecca, if you look at it in this way, whilst she may have not felt responsible directly for what happened to Max, she may have felt somewhat responsible and connected to the aftercare when it came to finding him on the floor. If she did perform CPR, thinking, did I do it correctly? Did I do enough? Did I do it too hard? Did I do it too lightly? All those questions, overthinking, overanalyzing in the moment. And then maybe things settle. But then on the day of the voicemail, upon hearing that news by Jonah, that it's not good news, it triggers almost like a flashback to the event that happened, and that feeling of, I didn't do enough. I didn't do the CPR correctly. But there is a chance that either you did everything correct, you did everything you could possibly do under those circumstances, or there was just nothing you could do to begin with because you weren't there and you weren't expected to be there. You know what I'm saying? And that can apply in general in many different situations. It's like, you can only do so much. You can only be in so many places. You can't be in multiple places at once. You can't be someone's carer, babysitter 24/7. And I'm not saying that directly to the Rebecca Zahau situation, because technically Max is not a baby, he was a child. But I'm more so applying it just in general in life, maybe under other circumstances where there might be an older person at play who can look after themselves, take care of themselves within reason. And it's like, under those circumstances, it's the care factor, it's the emotional bond, it's the emotional side where you may feel tethered or connected to someone. And if you're a protective person, you'd like to do the best you can for someone. And when you're not around, when something happens, you might be hard on yourself. And at times when you do show and you do deliver and you do try to help, if it's not enough, because there's not much you could do in the first place, but you tried everything and exhausted yourself, you can still feel to blame afterwards, even though it wasn't your fault to begin with. That's what's important. It's not your fault. And as for Rebecca, she may have blamed herself on the day. She wasn't responsible for Max's fall, but in the care, in the hands of her, when it came to the CPR, possibly. And if that failed or didn't work, she may have linked back to a timeline of what happened and when did I show up, what did I do, how did I perform, was it enough? Well, clearly not, because look at what happened to Max. It's irrational thinking, but it's rational to the sufferer at the time. It's all they know of. But to an outsider looking in, who sees it in a non-emotional way, there's more at play. There's more factors to consider. Just like with the paintbrushes, more than one. Just like with the lack of fingerprints on some items compared to others. There's a story that has been untold and not made clear enough. Rebecca did not save Max because Max was unsavable at the time of when it happened due to the distance and the different rooms people were in. And if it's true, because it has been suggested online that once Max hit the floor, it was not looking good already. Even if CPR was given, it was too late by then. So there wasn't much more Rebecca could have done. She didn't, and she couldn't have saved him. So who else did Rebecca save in the past for this to warrant truth to it on the doorway? So I debunk Max on this. I don't think it's a reference to Max, even if it has been suggested in the past. If Max had survived in hospital and things were looking up in a positive way, then yeah, she did save Max, or you could say she did. But it wasn't that way in reality. Because you can see the height, you can see the drop, the extent. Beside that, with the doorway, what about Jonah Shacknai? It's a bit more of an updated photo, I guess. Jonah back then, though, who was not present because he was at the hospital whilst the evening before going out to dinner with his brother Adam and girlfriend Rebecca, whilst the biological mother and former partner to Jonah was at the hospital alone with Max because someone had to watch over him. The dinner out in the evening, considering everything that's going on, is a bit unusual. What I would like to have known, which it didn't really go into detail, was whilst they were having dinner, Jonah, Adam and Rebecca, were they chatty? Were they smiling? Were they laughing, joking, having a good time? Did they get drunk? Did they consume any alcohol? Was it a get-together? Was it making up for lost time? Was there much conversation about Max? Was the atmosphere flat, or was it quite bubbly and positive? What's the deal there exactly? That's what I'd like to know. Under the circumstances with Jonah, I did do a bit of a search, as in, has there been a time in the past where Jonah was in trouble, physically, psychologically? Did Rebecca step in back then to save Jonah, and that's what could warrant what was messaged on the doorway? She saved him. But it said there is no public record of Rebecca ever saving Jonah in a life-threatening or heroic capacity. That's got to say something, at least. There wasn't any mentions or attributions in the autopsy to say that Rebecca saved anyone in the past. It's a little bit strange, don't you think? So if he wasn't saved, who was then? But before we go to the next individual, as I said, there's a bit of a trigger warning. There's supposedly a bit of a darker past with Jonah back then. Even if it doesn't directly link to Rebecca, we still need to look at it. I was going to do a separate video myself on the matter, but the reason why I didn't, and I'm only including it here, is because it can't be as a direct theory, since the whereabouts of Jonah at the time, it said law enforcement had verified Jonah's location and concluded he was not present at the mansion during the time Rebecca died. But then again, if by some chance people felt that the police didn't do their job properly and they've twisted or bent the narrative, they could have done the same about verifying Jonah's whereabouts. You could consider that possibly. But besides not being saved in the past, did Jonah do anything good for people in the past? And from how it reads here at the top, whilst there's no public reports of Jonah suffering from serious chronic illnesses, the reason why I asked that is because besides the physical aspect, psychologically, did Jonah ever struggle mentally? And Rebecca came along and saved him or helped him, supported. But it says no known sign of illnesses. His past, though, is marked by significant personal struggles related to a volatile domestic history and unresolved anger issues. This comes across as if domestic behind closed doors with a partner. So for anyone watching right now, as a trigger warning, I'm just simply going to read out what's on screen. If you want to mute the video, feel free, or if you need a moment to pause, you can pause the video. You do whatever you need to do. It does say struggles and allegations of physicality. The most prominent struggles in Shacknai's past, in regard to Jonah, involved his second marriage to Dina Romano, which was described in police reports as volatile. Now, just reading that on the very surface level, is Rebecca in safe hands under those circumstances if there's a past with this individual, with someone else? I think that Dina Romano is the mother to Max Shacknai as well. And if I'm correct in saying that, Dina Romano at one point didn't quite see eye to eyes with Rebecca under the event with Max, felt there could have been more to it in other ways. Mutual allegations of assault. Between 2007 2009, police in Paradise Valley, Arizona, documented multiple incidents. Jonah Shacknai reported to police in 2008 that Dina had attempted to choke him during an argument. Conversely, Dina alleged that Shacknai had elbowed her in the chest in 2009. These could be some of the reasons which led to them splitting up. But under these circumstances, it's the roles have reversed the other way around from the looks of it. Because it seems like, it says mutual, meaning it's back and forth from the looks of it. So Dina had tried choking, with it highlighted in bold, that choke, it's like the same possible methods that could have been applied to Rebecca, considering what was around her neck area. It seems like, I think Dina was at the hospital though all the time, but if Dina had a past record and history for, wrapping hands or something around a person's neck area, it's similar to what Rebecca may have gone through. There's some links there, you could argue. But beside that, it says Dina alleged that Shacknai had elbowed her. So it seems like a two-way domestic situation, a toxic relationship where they're both bad for each other. Either they both falsely blame one another for damage and injuries, or they've actually done it to one another. Because, not normally, but other times it tends to be one-sided, But in this case, it's like give and take, making it even more of a volatile area. And when people with certain chemistry styles and personalities match up together, it can, cause a bit of a disaster. Issues with aggressive pets. Dina claimed she was afraid of what Jonah was capable of doing to her physically via their German Shepherd. She provided photos of injuries she claimed were inflicted by the dog and stated that Shacknai was not quick to pull the dog away when it became aggressive towards her. Now, if Jonah wasn't quick to act on someone who's in distress or trouble, could that be the same way with Rebecca, who was in some form of trouble for her to end up the way she did over the balcony? You could argue that. Just reading this, if you didn't know the other backstories, you could say that Jonah comes across, beside Dina as well, as a bit of a dangerous individual. But Dina seems to have a bit of form as well against or towards Jonah. So they both seem capable of being physical in bad ways behind closed doors. Both these individuals could have had a motive to take it out as a tag team or solo on Rebecca, because they feel that Rebecca is to blame for Max's outcome. And on the day of when things took a turn for the worst, because Jonah and Dina are at the hospital, they hear about it first, then what do? They go off to the house and take it out on her. You could think that, of course, but supposedly CCTV showed, the former couple at the hospital over the hours of when Rebecca was at the house and when she supposedly passed away. There is that. But, it just doesn't look good when some people with a dark past history of physicality, considering Rebecca is now or was with Jonah, and Jonah had a dark past, and Jonah, former's wife, supposedly had a dark past, and the former wife is still about in the presence of Rebecca and Max. It seems like a toxic triangular strangulation. No pun intended there, right? It doesn't seem like a healthy environment to be in. As for a psychological evaluation, during a 3-year custody battle with his first wife, Kimberly James, a psychologist noted that Jonah Shacknai appeared defensive and might have unresolved anger issues, though the psychologist also noted Shacknai clearly loved his children. It can be different for every situation. It can be different. Not every domestic case is the same. Not every victim or person on the receiving end is targeted the same way. Physical, psychological, age ranges can, vary. Some bad people can take it out on an innocent person of a certain age. Then in a different case, a person takes it out on someone on a much younger age. You get what I'm saying? Bad people doing bad actions can sometimes still have an area of where they will not sink to or go to. As bad as they are and as bad as what they've done, and they should be punished for it, of course, because it's not good, it's messed up, they may have their own limits, as in what they will do to someone or who they will not touch in a household. They might have kids, then they might have a wife, or they might have a best friend, or they might have a sister or a brother. And who they take it out on first or only, it might not involve the kids. It might only involve one person. You get what I'm saying? Selective in a way. It's all still bad, but some people may have limits, other people don't. And under these circumstances, whilst Jonah may have been physically, aggressive and all of that towards one of the wives in the past, or didn't appear as too caring and threatening in some ways, he was still very loving towards his children. Kind of like when you get, a criminal, an underground criminal network, a mafia boss, someone, a hitman, a contractor. They do their job even if it's illegal, or they do actions which could be considered breaking rules and laws, and they don't care. They do it. They don't show much emotion, and then they come back to their kids, or they come back to a loved one. They come back to their grandmother. That anyone can touch them, but no one can touch their loved one. They can do anything to anyone else, but they will be loving towards their loved one. Certain limits, certain selectiveness, as in who goes, who stays, who's harmed, who remains untouched. That could apply here. As for professional and public life, outside of his personal, legal and marital struggles, Jonah Shaknai's history is defined by a highly successful and high-profile career. Government service, the late 1970s and early 1980s, he served as a chief aide to the US House of Representatives Committee for Health and Policy and helped to draft health legislation. Pharmaceutical career, founded Medicis Pharmaceutical Corporation, 1988, serving as chairman and CEO until the company was sold for approximately $2.6 billion in 2012. So, last but not least, late night overnight, which was the 12th day, the day before Rebecca's death. After dinner, Rebecca and Adam Shaknai, the brother to Jonah, returned back to Spreckles' mansion, whilst Jonah, boyfriend to Rebecca, stayed at Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego. He was keeping a vigil at the bedside of his 6-year-old son Max, who was in a critical condition following a fall. Recuperation reports indicate that Jonah also spent time that night at a nearby Ronald McDonald house to rest, whilst remaining close to the hospital. Do you see how it says reports indicate that Jonah also spent time? Not with absolute certainty. He may have spent time at a house, but did he spend all that time there? If you really knew the true time of death for Rebecca, if it was in the much earlier hours of the morning, could maybe Jonah have paid Spreckles' mansion a visit, maybe? July 13th morning, Jonah was still away from the residence when his brother Adam discovered Rebecca's body herself at 6:45 a.m. Adam notified Jonah of the death via a text message shortly after calling emergency services. Law enforcement verified Jonah's location and concluded he was not present at the mansion during the time Rebecca died. Okay. But are people convinced enough by that with what law enforcement verify? If Rebecca's family weren't satisfied with other areas, as in how the case was handled, would they be satisfied with this verification of Jonah? It does make you think. When referring back to the doorway, it seems like Rebecca never saved Jonah because there was never a time or a reason to under those circumstances from what the search results say. In terms of can you save her, would Jonah be in a position to save her? Well, if Jonah was unaware of what was happening and was away from it, there was no chance he wouldn't be able to do that. Under what's been said at least. So what other male is present? Well, Adam, the brother. Physically and locally speaking, Adam was on site. He was in the guest house, so he was in a different room away from it, so he wouldn't have visually seen it, but he was close enough for the events to unfollow. It was said in the autopsy that Adam was last to see Rebecca alive at 2000 hours p.m. the night of the 12th, the night before her death, the night before he found her the next morning. And it was around 6:30 when Adam left the guest house in the courtyard back garden and noticed when looking up, there's Rebecca over the balcony, and then rushed to try and undo her, get her down onto the grass, perform CPR, and it wasn't successful. And as well, when police concluded their investigation, there was no touch-based DNA on those items or things that he claimed to have done. Just like how there's no DNA to do with Rebecca on the paintbrushes? Is that because Adam used them himself and that's why there's no DNA on that? If he's done other stuff and there's no DNA on that, then he could have done the same with the paintbrushes, no DNA on that. You let me know what you think down below. But what would his motive be then? I mean, when we look at it, there is no public record of Rebecca ever saving Adam Shacknai. So if for some reason Rebecca, as it says here, she saved him, she saved Adam, supposedly not the case because there was not a time where Adam was saved in the past. No favours that need to be owed there. Before the events of July 2011, Adam lived a largely separate life from Rebecca and his brother Jonah. He worked for nearly 30 years as a tugboat pilot in Memphis, Tennessee. His only recorded interaction with Rebecca in a life-saving context was the exact opposite. He claimed to have attempted to save her by cutting her down from the balcony and performing CPR on the morning of July 13th. So, whilst she didn't save him, he supposedly made an attempt to save her. The fact that someone tried to save her based on Adam's description, does he know any more or any less behind this message on the door? What I'm wondering is, when Adam saw it all happen and he rushed inside the house to grab a knife to end up cutting the rope part so then he could catch her, did he do that all outside whilst on the table? Yeah, probably. Did Adam at any point before that go upstairs and notice the message on the door and think, right, I've got to save her? Or is that just a coincidence, unrelated, or runs in parallel, but at that time Adam didn't look at the door or didn't go upstairs because he was too busy focusing in on the outside of the property to rescue her? I mean, if there was another person present, an innocent bystander, they probably would have tried helping in some way. So this message on here, under the circumstances of how she was found, maybe most people, even without this message or prompt, would try and make an effort to help or save her. Just like how Rebecca unconditionally, without thinking, tried saving Max. So some things aren't to be expected, or some things aren't, supposed to be a chore. Even a connection with someone or a relationship, there might be a lot of commitment and focus and energy and closeness, but if it's meant to be and if it's stable and there's a deep understanding, the pressure eases, the responsibilities ease, and it just becomes natural without thinking too much, a place and state of peace shared together. But under these circumstances with Rebecca, there wasn't peace from the looks of it, because this cryptic message does not conclude with a positive. It's a question, can you save her before it's too late? So it doesn't end on a positive. It doesn't end with a form of peace or closure. So would Rebecca leave a message like this, knowing that there may not be a guarantee of peace or closure with the message that's been left on it? It makes you think. It could be somebody else that doesn't know the certainty, doesn't know the true depth, as in how far whoever this message is for will go to in order to protect and keep her safe and to save her. It makes you think. But beside that, whilst Adam has been a tugboat pilot for some time, because he will be into using ropes and tying knots on boats and docking them and keeping them at bay so they don't drift apart, experience with tying knots, sailor knots, it was referenced that was similar to what was found with Rebecca from the bed, balcony and herself. So, a person that has experience with certain knots, they're found on Rebecca, could there be a link? Or is it a coincidence? How many of the tugboat experts are out there in the vicinity then? Beside that, what else do we have? Prior to the 2011 death of Rebecca, Adam Shacknai did not have a documented dark past or a history of criminal activity During his testimony in the 2018 civil trial, he described his upbringing and adult life as stable and relatively quiet. And the upbringing: grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in southern New York, describing his childhood as happy and stable, with a father who owned a small business and a mother who was a school guidance counselor. Career: worked as a tugboat pilot on the Mississippi River for nearly 30 years, a job he described as satisfying and based on camaraderie. Long-term relationship: at the time of the trial, he's been in a committed relationship with the same woman for over 20 years. No prior criminal record. There were no reports of previous arrest, violent incidents, or dark secrets brought to light by investigators or the Zahau family's legal team from his time living in Memphis. So, with no real dark past or anything like that, that motivation or that fire within, that darkness that could have come to light, probably wasn't present in the moment. But then again, not everybody has to have a dark past to act out in the heat of the moment, to do something they may later regret. But based on what we've got here, this was just a little look into who could have been responsible behind the painting and who's not likely, and who this message was actually aimed towards. Was it a specific person, the same one that was saved previous, or a completely different person, a stranger, separate person that has ties, connections to the saved individual in the past, like an emotional connection, saying now it's your time to give back. All in all, hopefully you found this video interesting and it made sense and it wasn't too deep, but I just wanted to cover every angle, or most of them, and the different theories and the perspectives behind it. We'll see what happens next, because there is still some unfinished business with this case and the odd theory to possibly slip in at some point. And I'll get into that in a separate video. But if you enjoyed the video, if you'd like to see more of this, let me know. Comment section, or just give the video a thumbs up, maybe even share the video. If you're on mobile device or tablet, down below in the comment section, swiping across, there should be a star hype button. That'll help get the video out there and push it for more awareness. Because what tends to happen is other creators, bigger channels, will cover this case from start to finish as a story and conclude with, it is what it is. But if there's still unfinished business and there's more to it, you need to look beyond what happened and what's going on after a point or at a certain time. And the paintbrushes, no DNA on that. Lack of DNA on the paint itself more implies that she had nothing to do with that. And that one thing is more than enough, if it was true, is more than enough to say that there's foul play, on the conditions that she didn't actually touch or use them, because someone must have done to leave a mark and a message behind, so they would have seen, they may have been involved, but they did not act or help. Why would a person help if they're the ones that put someone in that place to begin with? So, with that all being said, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks for watching. Shout out to those that are watching in the background. My name's Wyatt Raff. Goodbye and good night.